there are wicked people who pray. They come to church. They give money. They send shoeboxes. They go out on the mission field even. They do amazing things. There's some preachers that are wicked. God does not hear their prayers. The evil speech of the wicked is the counterpart to the prayers of the righteous. Here are some of our servicemen praying. And the heart of the righteous is what God delights in. He knows what's inside of us. A cheerful look brings joy to the heart. Good news gives health to the bones. Actually, it's good news puts fat on the bones. That doesn't sound healthy, but in the Old Testament, fat was a good thing. They hardly ever got meat. And so, you know, if you were large, God loved you because, you know, you were able to eat well. And so when they talked about getting fat, they said, this is a good thing. And so it put fat on those bones. The heart guides a person's words and actions, but it is also receptive to kindness. Yes, the heart is supposed to guide you, but it also should accept what people do. And so it will bring you cheer in this life. The condition of the heart influences a person's health. And this is one of the things that the Proverbs tell us, is that if our hearts are right, if we're doing wise things, if we're listening to the consequences, if we're getting good advice, if we're listening to God, we're going to be healthier. Now, is this a promise? No. This is just a general statement. You know, it's a general statement about if you work out, you'll be healthy. If you don't work out and sit at your desk all day long, you know, you won't live as long. So it's a general statement. It's a proverb rather than a promise. If we look to the context that follows this particular verse, good news also includes a life-giving rebuke. Good news is not just a cheerful word and happy, happy, joy, joy all day long. It also talks about rebuke, and doctors tell us this all the time. Yeah, if a doctor tells you you need to cut out the fats, you need to cut out the sweets, you know, they're interested in helping you be cheerful and joyful in this life. He who listens to a life-giving rebuke will be at home among the wise. Listen to people. It's not stated whether the rebuke is given with a cheerful look. Hi, you know, you need to cut out the sweets. But making the rebuke is something that is both appealing and persuasive. You know, what exactly is this rebuke? Is it a cheerful look rebuke, or is it's actually something that changes us? Rebuke brings life because it brings wisdom. He who ignores discipline despises himself, but whoever heeds correction gains understanding. You know, it's talked about in the book of Proverbs that when we gain wisdom, we will help our families, but we'll also help ourselves. And if you ignore the discipline, if you ignore the teaching and the correction that God brings us, which are all part of instruction and discipline, then you will hate yourself. You won't live as long. You won't be as happy. You won't have the joy that God wants you. Whoever heeds instruction gains understanding. Those who ignore discipline not only disrespect others, they hate themselves. These are the most redneck-looking kids I've ever seen. I mean, this kid is missing teeth here and here and here, and this guy doesn't have any teeth, and they're just happy. I'm not saying that rednecks are... Zach just looked up. Redneck? Why are they talking about me? I'm just saying that if you ignore discipline, you're going to hate yourself. To gain understanding is to respect and love yourself. The fear of the Lord teaches a man wisdom, and humility comes before honor. We have to put humility first. And in the Bible, it will say, then we will gain the honor that comes in this world. The second mention of the fear of the Lord in this chapter, like the first one back in verse 16, compares what is great to what is little. In this saying, however, what seems small leads to something that is bigger. When we have humility, it seems small, and it seems like this isn't something that's going to do anything. But it leads to something that is bigger and greater in this world, namely honor. Fear of God is a stepping down from self-rule. It is becoming small, but that will lead us to something that is bigger. In the same way, before you're honored, you have to seek humility. If you are a humble person, you will become honored. If you just want the honor, your life is going to end in disaster. This is, anybody recognize that person? Dwight Eisenhower. Good job, Ken. Before he was honored, before he made it onto our money, before he made it onto our interstates, he was a plebe, no, that's not what they call him, cadet in the academy. You know, having to make his bed, getting yelled at for his shoes not being shined, you know, having to do push-ups, all of those things that they do to get you in the line before he receives honor, before he's in charge of the European theater. He had to be humble. Verse 16 spoke of material gain. This speaks of an increase in status. Eisenhower gained status because he was willing to work for it. The last proverb of this whole antithetical collection, all the way from 10 to 15, is actually not an antithetical proverb. And it leads us into the next chapter, which is going to be talking about things that build on each other rather than contrast with the previous one. Let's take a look at what the Lord sees. We've seen some proverbs here about what God sees. The proverbs of this chapter affirm that God sees and understands the workings of the human heart. He knows what's inside you. You can't hide anything from God. You know, and He has seen it all before. You can tell Him anything because God has seen everything. You're never going to surprise Him. He's already heard it. He already knows what you did. He already knows what goes on in your heart. This chapter contains 9 God sayings. And there are 9 more in the next chapter, and then they kind of disappear for a while. And so we see this is the end of this particular section, and these 9 sayings in the next chapter introduce the next section. Beginning with verse 11, these sayings move from behavior to the matters of inner life. And God sees not only what we do, but He also understands what we think. And that is a good thing in this world. Therefore, just as the real work of learning wisdom takes place in the heart, so God examines the intentions that are stored there. You know, wisdom just doesn't act it out. It comes from within us. And God knows, and God is working on the things that are inside of our heart. God sorts out the thoughts that are detestable and pure, and He befriends the righteous who are while opposing the wicked. God looks beyond the appearance to what appearance reflects to what is within inside. Yes, what we do is reflected on the outside sometimes, but God knows everything that goes on the inside. Even the prophet Samuel, we studied Samuel here a couple years ago. You know, he was fooled by the appearance and the height of Jesse's older sons. And he finally was told, no, none of those. Go get the youngest guy, this little squabbly little spindly little guy that wasn't much to look at, and said, here, choose him. You know, Samuel was fooled by the outside. God is not fooled by the outside. 2 of the 9 God sayings in this chapter point to the appropriate response of the heart. We are to fear God. Now, the fear of the Lord in the book of Proverbs means that you understand God knows more than you do. You know, it's not some abject terror that you have to be afraid of God. You should be afraid of God because He can snuff you out like that. But in the book of Proverbs, what it means is that we understand God knows more than we do. God has got good advice, and He's willing to share it with us. Wealth and honor are never separated from the attitude that we bring in acquiring these things and using these things. God looks at the attitude of our hearts. You know, Mark Twain once wrote a series of letters called Letters from the Earth, and he said he was writing as one of the devil's disciples. And he said, you know, all those people that give so much money to the poor, it was because of me. I made them sin, and now I'm making them feel guilty, and they're giving money to the poor. Well, God not only looks at the gift, He also looks at the intentions. And God understands those intentions and how we have used our wealth and how we acquired that wealth. We also need to talk about living before God. It is a joyful life. Life lived in God's presence is a feast of cheerfulness, is what it calls. You know, there's lots of good food on that plate, except for the beans. I don't know why I put a plate with beans on it. Anybody who brings beans next week will not be my friend. No, I will eat them if you bring them. I promise. These images of gladness are not associated with riches. They're not associated with honor. They are associated with